Nakuru County. Another very entertaining duel shaping up for Nairobi County Senate seat as Gideon Mbuvi alias Mike Sonko gets the TNA ticket. He will face off with activist extraordinaire Okia Okiki Omtata of Ford Kenya and Bishop Boniface Adoyo of Labour Party in the race for Nairobi County Senator. Mutula Kilonzo's chances of getting into the Senate in March gets a big boost after he wins the Wiper Party ticket to vie for senatorship of Makueni County. UDF makes very quiet nominations as the former Eastern Province and Wiper Democratic Movement delivers the most peaceful nominations. This is Choice 2013. The journey KTN has begun with you to the general election of March 4th this year. But first, the highlights. Shock for defectors, IEBC shuts the door. Seeking justice, protesters storm Orange House. Fallen giants, big names wiped out in nominations. And how about Governor Waititu, Nairobi's queer politicians? All right, this is Choice 2013. Many thanks for staying with KTN. But first, let me hand you over to Noah Otieno for a look at some of the big names, indeed, that voters expect to fall during this nomination exercise, whose results are still coming in. Noah?
Yes, indeed, Linda. The political party primaries that have just been concluded around the country have delivered some very interesting results and also some very, very big disappointments for most of the big names in Kenya that have become household names in the Kenyan nation. For example, although the National Alliance is yet to declare the official results for the Nairobi governorship race, they indicated earlier in the day that Ferdinand Waititu, the immediate former Embakasi MP, was leading, was far much ahead of the businessman Jim Nambaru, and was therefore very likely to be their candidate for governor of Nairobi County. He was comfortably ahead of businessman Jim Nambaru, and the latest, therefore, was indicating that he could just be the TNA candidate in Nairobi County. And he's a very interesting politician, was never shied away from either verbal or physical showdown in Embakasi. The other very interesting result in Nairobi, which has not come as much of a surprise to anyone, is the TNA choice for Senator of Nairobi County. Gideon Mbuvi, also known as Mike Sonko, is arguably the most down-to-earth and sometimes the most excessively comical politician in Nairobi. He is now the TNA candidate for Senator of Nairobi. He is fondly referred to as Mtu wa Watu, meaning a man of the people, by the people of Makadara constituency. There is also the Ford Kenya candidate for Senator of Nairobi, activist extraordinaire Okia Okoiti Okwara Omtata, who is now the Ford Kenya candidate for Senator of Nairobi County. He will be remembered for chaining himself to the gate at Nairobi Police Headquarters in one of his numerous protest marches in the city. A big win in Nakuru County for the former administration police commandant Kinuthia Mbugua in Nakuru County, who now has the TNA ticket for Nakuru County governor. This was a big loss for the immediate former Nakuru town MP Lee Kinyanjui. Among the most disappointing news of the political party primaries for a powerful cabinet minister in Kenya is the news of the primaries in Kirinyaga County, that of the finance minister Njeru Githai, who's lost the race for TNA ticket for governor of Kirinyaga County. He has lost to the newcomer in politics, Joseph Ndadi. Also a big win for Mutula Kilonzo in Makueni County in the race within the Wiper Party for the Senate ticket. Mutula has beat Gideon Ndambuki, but Ndambuki has gotten in touch with me this evening and he has sent me a message saying he doesn't feel that he lost fairly in the race for Makueni County Senator. He feels that there were dirty games that were played, but he has called on his supporters to remain calm, very calm. Interesting news also coming from Odhaya constituency. where the flamboyant businesswoman Mary Wamboi has won the TNA ticket for Member of Parliament, beating Gishuki Mugambi. Remember, that race went way, way, way into the night last night, and the results just came out this morning. The immediate former Naivasha MP, John Mututo, who is known by many alcohol takers in Kenya today, has lost the battle for the ticket for Naivasha MP in TNA to John Kihagi. But he immediately defected to NARC party to secure a nomination to ensure that he's on the ballot on March 4th. Also losing big is the immediate former Bomet MP, Beatrice Cones, who lost in the URP race for that ticket. Remember, she recently defected from the ODM party to the URP party in order to try and get the nomination. Still hanging in the balance is the fate of the sister to the Prime Minister, Raila Odinga. This is Ruth Odinga, who was running for the ODM Kisumu ticket for Kisumu governor, but the chaotic nomination process in most of Luo Nyanza has caused the declaration of that ticket to be put on hold. So we don't know the fate of Ruth Odinga yet. Also, still unknown is the fate of ODM's Professor Enyang Nyong'o, the Medical Services Minister, who wanted to be the ODM candidate for Senator of Kisumu. We don't know what will happen. We don't know whether the results for that particular ticket in Kisumu will be announced. We don't know when it will be announced. We don't know if it will be announced. In Mombasa, Suleiman Shahbal has abandoned the UDF party and joined the Wiper party in Code Alliance to contest the same seat of governor of Mombasa County. Remember that he was the only UDF candidate there, and therefore UADF in Mombasa now has no candidate for the position of governor. Back to you, Linda.
Noah, many thanks for that. Of course, we'll be looking at those results in detail with Charles Kanjama and asking the questions that a lot of Kenyans have been asking even as this nomination process came to an end and as the results come in, and of course lots of disagreements, lots of anger at the results and how the process was carried out. Now, chaos erupted at the Orange Democratic Movement headquarters today when successful aspirants who arrived to collect their certificates were informed that they could only do so starting Monday. Youth who chanted and marched around the Orange House in protest termed the delay as a ploy to rig the party primaries, while others complained that the results were not accurate as they were not given the chance to vote. Take a look.
Now, Orange House has been a hive of activity today as party after party, group after group, aspirants and their supporters arrived here to collect their certificates. However, they would find at the gate a notice informing all successful aspirants that they could collect their certificates on Monday and not on Sunday as had been agreed earlier, this leading to confusion, chaos, riots, chanting by those who are disgruntled by this notice. Now, the groups that have arrived here today have expressed fears that this lapse and this delay in the distribution of certificates could serve simply to create a gap where they could be robbed of their victories, and these victories handed over to less deserving individuals.
Na iko rumors kwa ground, iko wengine wanataka kuhijack certificate. Hiyo ndio sababu tumekuja kukampa hapa ndio tuone kama mtu yetu atapata certificate ama hatapata.
Kuna njama ambazo zinaendelea chini kwa chini. Watu ambao wameshindwa, ambao wanataka kuchukua kwa njia ya nyuma certificate ambazo sio halali kwao.
While there were several groups drawn from across the country that expressed their fears that the certificates would be awarded to those who had not won at the party primaries, residents of Laini Saba would, however, present a different grievance. They say that while other areas were allowed to vote in the party primaries, they never received polling materials and polling clerks never arrived in their area, and therefore they were not able to vote.
Sisi kama wananchi wa Kibra tunakataa kwamba hawa watu wanatumana area fulani zinapigwa kura kwa usalama, alafu station moja ambayo ingetoa mshindi wanakataa isipigwe kura. Kwa hivyo tunasema hivi kwa mheshimiwa wetu Prime Minister, kama hata ingilia hii swala, hata yeye hatumpigii kura, tutaenda TNA.
The residents now demanding a ballot box, polling clerks and all other materials in order to cast their votes today. It would take the intervention of former Member of Parliament Ruben Dolo to calm the crowds down.
Mimi hapana mwoga. Mimi nataka kusolve hii problem ile iko naisha once and for all. Sawa sawa.
But even as the youth rioted at the Orange House from a different location, the ODM National Elections Board issued a statement saying that it had fully complied with the law in the nomination exercise. It went on to say that the nomination exercise had officially ended as provided for by law. As to questions raised by aggrieved parties, the National Elections Board urged the aspirants to be patient as it was sitting in order to determine various disputes. It also revealed that it was deliberating on the issue of the Siaya County gubernatorial contest and that of Gem parliamentary seat. As the shadows grew longer, many would remain here, saying that they would not budge until they were sure that the candidates they had voted for had received their certificates. I'm Wilkie Sanyabwa at the Orange House.
You're watching Choice 2013. Many thanks for staying with us. Let's move a little bit away from the politics and bring you news just in. A fire has broken out at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency warehouse here in Embakasi, Nairobi. That is opposite Kenya Airways headquarters. The Kenya Red Cross Society Emergency Operations Center, which raised that alarm, has notified the City Council of Nairobi Fire Department, whose staff, as we understand, are en route to the warehouse. The origin of that fire is unknown. We have no idea of the casualties numbers, but of course we shall be bringing you the updates as they stream in once again. A fire has broken out at the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency warehouse in Embakasi, that is opposite Kenya Airways headquarters. We're keeping an eye on that story and want to get more details on it. We will, of course, let you know. Let's switch our attention back to the nomination and the results that are now streaming in and the fallout. IEBC is tonight warning that politicians who fail to be nominated at the just concluded party primaries by last midnight and defected to other parties for nomination certificates will be disqualified from the March 4th polls. The Commission has also warned that it will not accept nomination results from any political party that conducted primaries after the January 18th deadline provided for in law since party nominations last evening. The Electoral Body's shocker to parties came a few hours after several big names sought nomination certificates from other political parties after they were trounced during nominations. Patrick Amimo has the details.
Parties in the Jubilee and Code alliances faced logistical nightmares after they decided to conduct party primaries a day to the deadline provided for by the Elections Act. This was in an attempt to stop defections and or grab strong and dissatisfied opponents trounced in rival parties' nominations to their side. In a notice issued to political parties, the Electoral Body has warned that party nominations ended last midnight. IEBC said any party that conducted primaries after January 18th was in violation of the Elections Act, and the Commission will not accept those results. The Commission further warned that any person who failed to be nominated following party primaries as at last midnight is disqualified and cannot move to another party for a nomination certificate. The shocker came a few hours after outgoing Naivasha lawmaker John Mututho defected to NARC after being trounced in the TNA primaries. John Kihagi was nominated to be TNA's flag bearer for the Naivasha parliamentary seat. Mututho claimed TNA nominations would not have been free and fair because the officer who presided over the nominations had led several demonstrations in Naivasha against him over the Alcohol Control Act, popularly referred to as Mututho laws.
The returning officer is the chairman of Naivasha Bar Owners Association. So how would you expect the chairman of Naivasha, forget about TNA, the chairman of Naivasha Bar Owners Association and his officials to conduct an election that have John Mututho as a candidate? So I made up a decision very early. I will show you my certificate from yesterday evening.
But is NARC not encouraging party indiscipline through party hopping?
Democracy does not mean people are not given an opportunity to elect the leaders who they want to elect. Mheshimiwa Mututho, when he realized the elections in Naivasha were a sham, he decided to come and join the party within the Jubilee coalition, where he realized there's democracy.
Even if I wanted to be mischievous, I would have gone to ODM, I would go to Wiper, I would go to PIC, I would go. There's a whole list of places to shop around.
It is suspected some politicians in main alliances had bought direct nomination tickets from partner parties that did not attract candidates. In Makueni County, Education Minister Mutula Kilonzo clinched Wiper's senatorial ticket against Assistant Minister for Agriculture, Gideon Ndambuki. The two had expressed fears the primaries will not be free and fair. Though it was not immediately clear whether Ndambuki will remain in Wiper, a section of the media had earlier quoted him saying he had many options, including defecting if he suspects the elections were a sham. Housing Minister Soita Chitanda recently defected to Newford, Kenya, and secured a direct ticket to vie for Kakamega governor's seat. This was after UDF disqualified him, citing doubts about his academic papers. Chitanda said he read mischief in UDF's decision. Chitanda will face off with former Nyanza PC Paul Orlando, who clinched the UDF ticket, and ODM's Wycliffe Oparanya for the governorship should IEBC and the Commission for Higher Education certify his degree. At the Wiper Party headquarters, Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka welcomed to the party former Kenya National Human Rights Commission Vice Chair Hassan Omar and Mombasa businessman Suleiman Shabal, who will vie for the Senate and governor seats in Mombasa County.
Those who feel unhappy, in the case of Wiper Democratic Movement, we've set up the appeals board, and if there are people who are disgruntled and they feel that we still have up to Monday to be able now to submit the party list, and here I must thank IEBC because the timelines were very, very strict.
The Political Parties Act 2011 had banned political defections 3 months into the general election and or by-election. However, last month before Parliament was dissolved, lawmakers watered down the strict provisions and changed the law to allow defections to at least 45 days before general elections. Patrick Amimo, KTN.
Right, in the interest of accuracy, allow me to correct something. No, Tieno had video wall and he was looking at the big names that are currently falling in the nomination exercise, whose results are still coming in. We were supposed to have shown the picture of Beatrice Coness. Unfortunately, we showed you the picture of Joyce Labo, so we do apologize for that. But let's shift our attention to the story that you've just seen on your screen. Let's bring in Charles Kanjama, an advocate. Charles, you have politicians up to this morning still defecting to different parties. How legal is it?
Totally legal. Mm-hmm. I think I want to say that it is not a shocker, neither to the politicians, nor to the lawyers who are the advisors, nor should it be a shocker to the general public. The politicians themselves are the ones who passed this Political Parties Act, who passed the Elections Act, and it was very clear that the last day for getting nominations was 45 days before the elections. That was January 18th. Thankfully, the Electoral Commission moved the deadline to midnight. They could have insisted on 5 p.m. So I think the politicians knew what was happening. Those who have tried to shift parties after midnight are definitely in violation of the law. And I think there's something else that the politicians need to realize, because some were advised by clever lawyers that they can have nomination certificates backdated.
Yeah, that is the argument around social media.
And that once they do that, they will pass the hurdle. Of course, this becomes an issue of evidence. On the day when they are presenting the nomination certificates of the new parties to the Electoral Commission, will the Electoral Commission have evidence that these people indeed were members of those new parties that they have hoped to?
So we are looking at the party registers.
We are going to look at the party registers. There's an electronic copy, and each party also has its manual copy. And I think in addition to that, there's something else we need to consider, which is that many political parties in their party constitution have rules requiring a member who is resigning from the party to fulfill certain requirements, to give notice to the party in writing, maybe to have a period of even up to 7 days. So if someone has jumped ship from ODM today or even yesterday, did he comply with those party rules? Because you can't join a new party when you're still a member of an old
Charles,
party.
essentially that means you will belong to 2 political parties.
Yes, and that is not allowed. You need to choose one party, and before you've effectively resign from one party, you cannot join another party. So those are some of the hurdles that the persons who are party hopping right now will face come the date for presentation of nomination certificates.
So IEBC can actually put a stop to this?
Can put a stop to it, and it is also important to note that the Electoral Code of Conduct actually allows IEBC to really punish or penalize both parties and individuals who engage in any form of fraudulent conduct, so that a member of a party who decides to assist these last-minute party hoppers could find that his own party has gotten some sanction from IEBC. So I think everyone has to treat this question with the seriousness it deserves. So in essence,
both the politicians and the party could actually get in trouble.
Exactly.
Charles Kanjama, stay with me because there's a very interesting story coming in from Kisumu. We'll talk about that. Stay with me. We are speaking to Charles Kanjama. He'll stay with us for a while. But for now, I hand you over to KTN's John Alanamo, who is in Kisumu. He has a different perspective to what we're talking about at the moment. John.
Well, yes, indeed, Linda. Very interesting discussion you're having there in studio with Charles Kanjama, and it has a huge bearing on what's been happening here in Kisumu. Now, the botched party primaries in the 4 counties that make up Luo Nyanza has just exposed how valueless the average voter is to the political process here in Kisumu and in Kenya. Many voters across the areas of the region experienced an array of challenges that at first seemed like organizational teething problems, but soon took on a very definite political tone. Our Western region reporter Fredo Mulo gives us a glimpse at some of the signs that enraged the electorate, but soon made it realize that its place in the pecking order. And this may be fomenting a rebellion against the party and its leader, Raila Odinga.
If ever there was a time that the ODM High Command spoke loudly with its primary support base without uttering a word, it was definitely this week's party primaries. As results trickled into newsrooms today across the country, some voters had not cast their ballot, yet they already had candidates. A good example being the newly minted Homa Bay Town constituency.
We are here and we are requesting the ODM board, the election board, to make us be aware of what is happening. We are not aware of what is happening. We are not being told anything.
The litany of confusion included late delivery of ballot papers, a total lack of voting in some areas, misspelled candidate names, disappearance of key officials, and sanctioning of voting past the IEBC's midnight deadline yesterday. In Dewa constituency, voting hardly took place due to late delivery of materials, while in Bita, voting continued today despite the IEBC closing the window for party lists yesterday.
One thing that we need to know is that ODM is not the only party. And ODM, if they have their candidate, they should be specific and tell us that this is a members club only, so that the rest of us can find their way out. They should not take advantage of the support that we give the party to be of their own. And what we are saying is that we are going to support a candidate of our choice, irrespective of the party it is going to come with.
Today evening, ODM's Homa Bay returning officer was allegedly hijacked and is now a hostage of an aspirant. It is this disregard for the role of the voter in the political process that is slowly sinking into the mind of the electorate. Its participation counts for nothing in the pursuit of power. From Homa Bay County, I am Fredo Mulo.
Just attached to that story, we've received footage from Rongo constituency where Homa Bay County returning officer John Mulehi is alleged to have been kidnapped. It's also alleged that the presiding officer for Kasibul Kabondo constituency was also kidnapped. Now, the alleged kidnapping took place before he was going to announce the nomination results from that county. We're yet to establish the whereabouts of the returning officer or of that presiding officer. But in the meantime, the ODM Election Supervisory Panel has been sending text messages to all of its aspirants in the region, asking them to file any disputes with them. As attached to all of the issues that we're having here, this is a question for Charles Kanjama back in Nairobi. Some of the concerns that aspirants here that have been claimed to have been disenfranchised, as well as the voters themselves, is what happens next with respect to who goes forth to the March 4th election. Do the people who still hold ODM or any other party, for that matter, nomination certificates from 2007 go on? What is the criteria? What are some of the things that ODM and all the other parties where people are jumping ship might be considering, or where people haven't had the opportunity to vote, Charles?
That is an interesting question. The first destination to determine the answer to that question is the party nomination rules. And each of the parties has filed a set of nomination rules with the Electoral Commission. They are required to comply with the nomination rules. If the nomination rules provide for various means of nomination, not just the nomination by ballot, but direct nomination, then it is possible for those who are given the responsibility of direct nomination to nominate someone directly. But they'll need to show evidence that they did it by midnight last night. If the party nomination rules provide for a ballot and evidence comes out that there was no ballot, then that party would need to forfeit the possibility of presenting a candidate for that particular seat, whether it is a member of parliament, whether it is gubernatorial, whatever seat it is. I think for those who may have shifted to other parties, the same question arises. What do the party nomination rules in that new party say? Did they move or hop to the new party in compliance with the law? If they did not, then they will also be disqualified. I think it would be really unfortunate if we find any seat in the Republic of Kenya without a duly qualified candidate, because if that happens, then during the general elections, there will be no elections in that particular constituency or ward, and they would have to go for a by-election after the general election. So the choices are really stark for the parties that have failed to comply with the deadline of midnight, January 18th.
Now, Charles, that's a very interesting answer, especially with respect to Nyanza and Luo Nyanza in particular, where that could happen. Because we're sort of on the verge, or rather now we're into the deadline, we're in a legal lacuna, especially for the voters. What rights do they have if, for instance, no candidate was put forward for either parliamentary, gubernatorial seat, and no other party presents a candidate, which is very likely here, Charles?
First of all, I think it's important that I go back to the laws that govern the election process we are going through right now. The most important and the first critical provision is Article 38 of the Constitution, which says that every Kenyan, every person has a right to vote, and every person has a right to stand for elections. And this right should not suffer from unreasonable restrictions. So, of course, one option of anyone who thinks that any deadlines in the Elections Act or the actions of their political parties have resulted in unreasonable restrictions in their right to vote or their right to stand for election, they can go to the High Court to seek an interpretation of that provision, and indeed an interpretation of the constitutionality of the Elections Act and of the actions of the political parties. But they would need to get that interpretation pretty quick, because by February 2nd, the IEBC would have finished receiving all the nominations, presentation of nomination papers by the candidates. Then we go next to the Elections Act itself, which says that our party has to have finalized its nomination 45 days before the general election. But if after it finalizes its nomination, it is found that the candidate who had been nominated is disqualified, either because of violating the code of conduct, because of death, incapacity, or something of that nature, resignation is also allowed, then the party is given a limited window between now and the end of the month, when the nominations are being presented to the IEBC by the candidates, to nominate someone else. But they must first prove that there was a genuinely nominated person. So that is another opportunity that the parties have. And of course, the last opportunity is to go again to the court to seek extension of time. I don't think that would be an option that would have high chances of success. But the time limitation is found in the Elections Act. The Constitution can be used to extend that time limitation. But you need to show that it is an unreasonable time restriction. And I don't believe it will be easy to prove that. So you may find some of these candidates and some of these voters without any recourse because of the fact that elections is less than 45 days away.
All right, free legal advice there. Thanks very much, Charles Kanjama. We'll catch up with you and Linda later on in this bulletin. But back here, now we're almost 24 hours into the January 18th midnight deadline for the presentation of party lists. And believe it or not, members of the public in various parts of Kisumu are still voting. Nyando constituency residents began voting at a few minutes past 4 p.m. today, and residents of Kisumu Town West constituency turned up in large numbers to practice what they insisted was their democratic right. But the letter of the law is clear, and both the IEBC and the ODM National Elections Board seem keen to follow it. So What next for the voters in the region? That's something that we've been discussing with Charles Kanjama in Nairobi, as well as Linda Ogutu, and something we've been discussing throughout the day. What happens when, after January the 18th, you have a situation where people have voted and the deadline has passed? Charles Kanjama had some of the answers there, but let's take a look at what some of the voters there were saying today. Kisumu West constituency at about 2 in the afternoon. Hundreds of people eager to get their chance to nominate the leaders they want. Only this isn't Thursday the 17th of January, the day they ought to have voted. They are casting their ballots a clear 14 hours after the deadline for the presentation of party lists.
Kutoka juzi nangoja tu leo ndio nimepiga kura, sasa nimechoka na kunywa tu maziwa.
The turnout has been good, though compared with the first day it was supposed to be done, where by 6 a.m. this school was full. But now at least the turnout has gone down.
But it isn't their fault. Constant haggling the day before about how the vote in Kisumu County should have taken place gave way to this.
We have been going to the polling stations for the last 2 days. The voters have been waiting patiently to vote. The chairman of the elections board, Franklin Bett, should know it and know very well that whether there is a legal requirement which has to do with the IEBC, that is their own mess, and we are not going to be used to clean it. And therefore we have declared the ballots be kept in the police station, and then we will have elections tomorrow.
Aspirants here would have their vote, whether it's legal or not. And perhaps no one has more to gain in Kisumu from the knocking out of over 30 county representatives, 20 parliamentary aspirants, and 7 gubernatorial aspirants than this man. Holding out a nomination certificate for the Farmers' Party, George Wedder has been a busy man these past 24 hours.
There are people who are coming to Farmers' Party because they are not happy with what happened in ODM nominations. So right now there are so many people coming in seeking parliamentary and county reps.
He's been dishing out direct nomination certificates to disaffected ODM aspirants for some time, happily unaware of the illegality of it all. Whether his new catches will be cleared to run is unlikely, given that many didn't defect from ODM before yesterday's deadline. But Wedder is assured of being on the ballot himself. He's running for senator in the same race as 3 other ODM candidates who've been locked out of the race, including Party Secretary General Anyang' Nyong'o. But in constituencies like Muhoroni, the frustration with being unable to vote has blinded members of the public from the fact that even if they vote legally, it won't matter.
Wasiweke ya kwamba kuna mtu tayari ashawekewa certificate ati yeye ni mtu ya ODM. Hapa hakuna mtu ya ODM. We are the people, we have the power to elect mwenye tunataka na kura yetu. Sisi kama watu wa Muhoroni hatutachaguliwa choice la tutaki. Uwezi ukaniletea maembe mbovu na unataka ninunue.
How ODM will resolve the lacuna in leadership created by a flawed election is uncertain. What is certain is that any list that ODM produces that has nominees for the constituencies and counties that didn't vote or were time barred will be challenged, both by the people and by the law. Very interesting situation there. Like I said, Nyando constituency is still voting at about 9:35 p.m. So many hours into the deadline already. I'm sure Charles Kanjama and Linda Ogutu have something to contribute to this situation. So I'll hand you back to Nairobi. Charles, I'm sure you have something to say about this.
Now, believe it or not, Charles cannot believe the pictures he's seeing on screen. He still cannot believe people are still casting their votes, which brings me to the my big question, Charles, tonight. Is this ignorance or total disregard of the law by parties?
I think at the level of the grassroots, it is ignorance, because the people at the grassroots need voter education, they need civic education, and that was meant to be provided by the parties, primarily, by IBC, secondarily. And I think that was not done. But at the level of the parties, the party leadership especially, this is pure impunity. To my mind, it is extremely shocking that people are still casting their votes today. I think IBC did the best they could. They gave repeated warnings to the parties. They told them, why are you taking the nomination to 2 days before the deadline or the day before the deadline?
Yeah,
they warned them.
Because, Charles, it looked like parties knew this. They pushed it too close. It was like a strategic move. They knew what they were doing.
Let me tell you, Linda, when IBC kept insisting that they will not extend the voter registration deadline, some of my friends told me, we know they will. And we plan
Kenyans,
to vote during the extended period because we've always registered during the extended period. So I think there's a culture of impunity that sometimes is so deep-rooted that it is difficult to eliminate at one go. So what happened with voter registration, the deadline was not extended, is also happening here. But what unfortunately some people did not realize that IBC does not even have the discretion to extend the deadline. If they sought to extend the deadline, they themselves would be violating the Elections Act. So they have gone as far as they could to bend over backwards to accommodate the parties. I think the Elections Act provides a very interesting sanction to any party or individual that violates the election regulations and the election rules and the election code of conduct, which is that that individual or that party can be stopped from presenting any candidate or presenting themselves as a candidate in that election or maybe even in a subsequent election. So it is possible, and this is something that may eventually emerge, that if a party tries to mischievously present a name of somebody who was nominated through voting today or tomorrow, that when IBC gets informed and has adequate evidence of that nature, not only will they disqualify that candidate, they will stop that party from presenting or nominating a candidate for that position, not just in 2013, but maybe even in 2017.
All right, finally, Charles, there are areas where people did not cast their votes. There were no nominations. What's the legal redress? What happens then?
Again, it goes back to the nomination rules. If the nomination rules give a discretion to the nomination board that each party has to override the lack of casting of ballots and select one candidate, then those people in the party can do so. But they need to prove or to give evidence to IBC to show that they did that on Friday before midnight, not today. And if those rules do not provide for an override of the nomination involving the party members, then the party just has to forfeit that position, learn the lesson the hard way, and ensure that they prepare very well for the next elections.
Charles Kanjama, many thanks for speaking to KTN. I'm not so sure if Namus has a question that he wants to ask for you. He wants to ask you, of course, he will let us know. Namu, do you have anything you want to ask Charles before I let him go?
Actually, yes, Charles, there's one more question that we have. It's arising from suspicions here that this may have been pre-planned. This may have already been a pre-designed plan to make it seem as if there were inefficiencies with the National Elections Board in order to present a list of candidates, a complete list of candidates. Now, what are the spectrum of sanctions that ODM may face if it presents candidates in constituencies where there is proof that there was no vote that was carried out, Charles?
I think the range of sanctions is quite wide, from fines, from being given warnings, to being forced to forfeit presenting candidates in particular constituencies or for particular seats. There is also the criminal sanction. If it can be proven that somebody has engaged in criminal conduct, the Electoral Commission officials can prosecute that as a criminal offense. That is now on the criminal side. So there's a criminal range of sanctions that is available. There's also the electoral sanctions, which basically means disqualification. And the disqualification can extend to that particular constituency, or even with the discretion of the Electoral Commission, can go beyond the particular constituency and hit them harder. They could even choose to disqualify, although I don't expect this would happen, the presidential candidate. Those are within the ranges of options that IBC has.
All right, many thanks, Charles, and thanks for joining us on KTN. A lot of people must have some more clarity about what the situation is moving forward. Now, it may have been already apparent to a few people in Siaya, but increasingly it's dawning on residents there that the voting process was perhaps one of the most spectacular in a series of sham elections that have taken place in this region. In Nairobi, ODM Appeals Board is still meeting over the issue and could be doing so well into the night. Aaron Ochieng reports.
Siaya County woke up to a bit of tension after the announcement by the ODM election secretariat in Nairobi nullifying what the returning officer had announced, that Dr. Oburu Odinga had won the gubernatorial race. And of course, this being the county where also the Prime Minister is coming from, raised a bit of issues in regard to what ODM as a party is doing to its supporters. So we woke up this morning and went round to find out exactly what people are thinking about the exercise that took place 2 days ago here in Siaya.
We shall look at other options, and the option that we have already at hand is seeking legal redress in the court of law.
Hatujafurahi na hiyo maneno kabisa. Inamaanisha hata party yetu ya ODM hata ikienda ni kama ni party ya ubaguzi, ni kama ni party ya tribalism, ama ni kama Odingism party.
Party wa ODM wajue kwamba party siko mingi sasa, tunaweza piga popote, ambapo hawa wanasema ati party ya ODM iko na wenyewe.
Wakachukua mwenye alikuwa anatakikana atangaze hiyo kura, wakapeleka Bondo. Sasa sisi hatutampigia rais kura kama amekataa kunini watangaze ati Odinga ndiye ameshinda.
It would be fair for us to delink Raila Odinga from whatever is going on, because if he was not for this, he would not have called for negotiations.
It's a pregnant behavior that can give birth to destruction to ODM, and you don't want it to do so.
And then, of course, people are still tense, also waiting for what the ODM Secretariat will have to say in regard to this a tight race between William Oduol and Dr. Oburu Odinga. Of course, what went around is that contrary to the opinion of the returning officer, most residents here think that William Oduol actually won the election and is being denied the ticket because maybe the ODM party preferred Dr. Oburu Odinga to have the ticket. So we are still waiting to see what will happen, and also the residents of Siaya are also waiting. But generally, Siaya has been peaceful despite the tension that the whole fiasco has created. Back to you.
Those are very interesting comments from the people on the ground there in Siaya. That situation as it unfolds will be part of the coverage that we have for you here on KTN, but the discussions already around the subject of internal democracy in ODM, and especially within this region, is something that that cannot be wished away neither by the aspirants or any officials or by the Prime Minister. This definitely is something that will be discussed with respect to his chances in the upcoming March 4th general election. But for now, let's wind things up from here. It's been a pleasure broadcasting from here in Kisumu, and I'll hand you back to Linda Ogutu to give you more of the national perspective with respect to these very interesting, very controversial nomination processes, not just here but around the country, Linda.
Alanamu, many thanks for that, John. Alanamu live in Kisumu. Well, let's stay with that internal democracy, and the reports reaching us right now is that Oburu Odinga, Jakoyo Midiwo, and Nicholas Gumbo have actually assembled somewhere. We are not sure exactly where. We'll give you the exact location, and they have given their side of the story. Of course, the results of the nominations were out, and some of the results regarding the three were rejected by the voters. Let's listen in a little bit on what they had to say.
If there is any dispute, then the dispute mechanism of the party can resolve it. But as it is now, I am the nominee of the party for the governorship, and it is wrong to say that I claim, because I don't control the results. The results are actually given to the returning officers, and they are the ones to verify whether they are correct or not me, and not even my competitor. He is just a contestant like me.
What you're seeing, and I want to go on record, even the security forces in Siaya are badly compromised. people are fighting in front of policemen who choose to look the other way. District commissioners, for example, like in Game, district commissioners were standing behind the returning officers. What role has a district commissioner got to do in a party election?
The results which were later announced yesterday for my opponent were my actual results. And remember this thing, the same exact thing happened to me in 2007, that my nomination results were announced for my opponent. And I'm very bitter because it is okay to lose. I've been an MP for 10 years. It doesn't have to be me, really. But that somebody can pay the police so that the police and the DC could sit and watch when people are being beaten by thugs, I think that is sad for democracy.
Oburu Odinga, Jakoyo Midio, and Nicholas Gumbo, they are trying to make the case. You're watching Choice 2013. Many thanks for staying with us. This far, we are taking a short break, but stay with us. We have lots more coming your way.
Konza Techno City, the first smart city in Kenya, will be launched to the public, local, regional and international investors on Wednesday, 23rd January 2013. The groundbreaking ceremony